Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. Okay, this week we are talking about patience. And I can't even say it with a straight face, right? Because, I don't know, a lot of us, myself included, don't necessarily have a lot of patience, or we think we don't. And we're going to find out that, of course, we're being too hard on ourselves. We have more patience than we think. But the reason that patience comes up is we're going to talk about balancing it with, I'm going to use the word ambition, all right? Which encompasses all the things we want, all the things we're going after, all the goals that maybe are on a timeline. Maybe we only have until the end of the year or in a specific qualifying period or something like that. So we're going after these goals with gusto, and we don't necessarily have or think that we have the luxury of having patience. And so often we think that ambition and patience are in opposition, when really they probably are two sides of the same coin, as long as we're getting out the metaphors anyway. So I think that's what we're going to start the conversation with, just that idea of there is a time and a place for both ambition and patience. And we're going to talk through that. So one of the places where that comes up hard, and again, sometimes we're not able to solve our mental challenges, our struggles on our own, but when we have a dog in front of us, suddenly it becomes crystal clear. And one of those challenges that becomes really clear is what I'm calling the young dog dilemma, okay? Which is when we look at that bright, shiny puppy, or maybe, up to 2-year-old dog or something, just kind of depends on your sport and how fast your dog progresses, et cetera, et cetera. But that look that we get when the feet are still pink, and I kind of joke that the stickers are still on them, and we think like this dog is going to be on the world team. This dog's going to go to the Invitational 7 times. This dog is going to get every title, every breed record, everything. And without maybe even consciously realizing it, you make this Santa's list of goals and objectives and dreams for this puppy before you even know what their desires are or what their talents are or what they're good at, etc. And because of a lot of factors, we then get into training and we perhaps start to rush even. Maybe we start to be in competition with someone else. Maybe we're in competition with ourselves or our last dog. Maybe we're in competition with the fact that we lost a dog recently, and that's the thing sort of driving us or hanging over our heads, whichever is more appropriate. And there's all kinds of things that happen. And we pile on all of these dreams, wants, wishes, needs, desires onto this little puppy before we really even give them a chance to show us who they are, okay? And of course, I'm being a little dramatic, but if truth be told, I'm probably not being that dramatic. I mean, I know I have to stop myself with my young dog, who is now just barely over a year, who I've not even had a year, right? And I have to stop myself all the time with wanting things for her, sports for her that she's not even really tried yet, or is not even really truly ready to go in the ring yet. She's going to be an agility star and she hasn't even done a full course yet. Her growth plates aren't even closed, for God's sakes, right? There's things I can't even do with her yet. And already I'm imagining, what her retirement, speech will sound like. Okay. So we all do this and it's okay. And I'm going to reuse that example throughout this because I think it's happening to a lot of people out there, but also I think it's a really great kind of tangible way that we can really understand what we mean by trying to balance ambition with patience. And that goes for our goal setting as well, right? How do we have ambition and lifetime goals for our dogs, but also ourselves, right? For a 6-year-old dog, but also our 50-year-old, 60-year-old selves. How do we have those things that we really want and that are potentially on a timeline, but also have patience to know that they need to unfold how they're going to unfold. We can only influence our dogs. We can't control our dogs. And some days we can only influence ourselves, not control ourselves. And there's just so much of the world that we don't control on the way to our goals. And having patience is not only allowing for things to unfold, but it's also making space for process goals, for, not just the what we want, but the how it's going to come about, and allowing ourselves to sometimes be surprised, but also to guide the journey in a more thoughtful way. I often say that, one of the reasons we get nervous and anxious about our goals is we are so focused on the outcome that we can't imagine the time it will take to get there, or we can't imagine the how, or we just truthfully don't want to slow down long enough to allow things to unfold, to focus on our process goals, and to really be patient with the execution. And so that's all part of this conversation. Now, when we talk about, obviously, in dog sports, we are driven to achieve success. You are driven, or you wouldn't even be listening to this podcast. You wouldn't need it. Okay. You wouldn't need it. All right. And whether we're talking about ourselves or our dogs, this is our fuel, right? Our ambition, our passion, this is where it comes from, this fuel to want. And that's a good thing, okay? But we don't want it to lead to our unrealistic expectations, or putting extra pressure on our dogs, or putting extra pressure on ourselves, or, really focusing on what I call that anvil of time, right? And I always call it that because in old-timey cartoons, that anvil would fall from a higher apartment building as some poor guy was walking by underneath it, right? And just so I always have that thought of that's how time, it's just going to catch me off guard, and etc. So I call it the anvil of time. Pardon the personal story. All right. But anyhow, this all kind of adds up. So we want to make sure that we are keeping this top of mind when we are pursuing our dogs, but also when we are planning. Did I say pursuing our dogs? Pursuing our goals, but also when we are planning out our time. Okay, meaning the year ahead, the trials that we have ahead. We want to keep this balance always in the forefront. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, when we talk about patience, the reason patience matters, obviously, is because everything has its own time frame. I could pull one dog out, teach him, a skill to shake. Let's just say we're teaching him to shake in 5 minutes, and the next dog, it's going to be 20 minutes or 2 days, right? So when we even think about very basic things, sometimes, we realize, or we're reminded constantly, that the time frame isn't set in stone. There isn't a book that you get out, when you get your new puppy home, and it comes with this book, and it says, okay, teaching this trick is going to teach 7.5 minutes. This trick is going to teach, 5 minutes, and to get them to have perfect weaves is going to teach, take 3 days. And of course, a perfect heel position is only going to take an hour or 2. And what's wrong with you if you can't get any of that done in that amount of time? Okay. Ridiculous. Probably ridiculous, except for the point of what's wrong with you, because I think comparison comes in, our goals, our ambition. We wonder, am I on time? Am I behind? We've been talking about that a little bit lately on the podcast of one of the roles of comparison is to get feedback, is to find out, like, are we on time? Are we ahead of the game? Are we behind? How are the other litter mates doing? Should I be doing better? Should I be doing more? What's going on? And so sometimes all of that is swirling around in our head as well as we look at ourselves in our, say, our mental game or even our skills development. Maybe there's a skill in class that is just taking us a while to really progress on, much less, really master. And we lose patience. We think it should be faster. It should be easier. Other things weren't this hard. Other dogs weren't this hard. Other, because it's what you have to compare to. We will never be so lucky as when we had our first dogs and we didn't know. We didn't know any better. My first dog was a perfect first dog. He was very honest. He gave me back what I gave to him, although I didn't really appreciate it at the time. He was kind of hard, but I didn't know better. I just thought, well, that's how they all are. And you just don't know what you know, right? Back then. But then I got another dog and she was a piece of cake and she was a star and she never did anything wrong. And then I got the dog after that, which was the opposite of that, as it goes, right? But point being, everybody has their own journey. To say that you have patience or don't have patience for something really is to be honest about taking into account the other's journey. Whether that's another person, maybe you're an instructor and your students you're trying to get across a new skill to your students and one student gets it right away and the next student is struggling, or whether you're trying to teach your dog, okay? We all have different journeys. And whether you're trying to teach yourself, right? To allow patience and grace for yourself to be able to grow. So again, we're balancing. Every time we teach ourselves something or we teach another human or another dog something, we're always in that battle of this expectation of what it, quote, should take and what it actually is taking. Again, sometimes we'll be pleasantly surprised. Sometimes we'll be banging our head against the wall seemingly for days. Okay? All right. The other thing I want you to keep in mind in this moment, in this conversation, is the long-term view, okay? I often talk about with my clients the long game, right? Taking the long game in mind, making investments today, knowing that what you do in the ring today is going to pay you back maybe 2 years from now, especially again with young dogs, right? Why do we socialize our dogs? Why do we drag our puppies to trials that they're not entered in? It's so that they get a lay of the land. They get used to going in and out of the car, going in and out of crates, meeting strange people, doing all that. Is that going to help them on that day? Maybe. But what we're really doing is investing so that finally in 2 years, when we come back to this venue and that dog is ready to compete, that investment has paid off because that dog walks in like, yeah, I know. I've been here 4 times already. This is no big deal. I've seen the ring. I've seen the people. I've heard the sounds. I've done the thing. I've jumped in and out of the car. Like, yeah, I get it. Oh, we're playing my game today? Great. Fantastic. All right. That's an investment. That's an example of what I mean by, you're playing the long game. Is it important that you go socialize your puppy today? Nope. But will you wish you had in 2 years? Yep. Again, investment. So when I say take the long-term view, this is really important when it comes to this conversation of patience, I'm going to say versus ambition. Because again, I do think it is 2 sides of the same coin or a continuum or however you want to visualize it. But some days you're going to need more patience. Some days you're going to be able to kind of run with the ambition that you have and the desires that you have and the things that you want, and everything's going to be lining up. So at the end of the day, what you're looking for is some kind of a balanced perspective, some kind of a perspective that allows you to understand what you are going after in the world. And when you take a look at your planner, say, for the year, and you sort of plan out, you kind of write down your goals for the year and you start to plan out your trials and your seminars and your big events and the different things that are going to happen this year, you start to look at, I like the visibility of that, right? You start to get visibility into your year ahead and into your goals and how that's all going to trickle through the year. And you find that balance between the wanting of it but also the patience of letting it unfold. And especially if you have a young dog, the patience of allowing a young dog to unfold and mature and grow out and go to some of these new places, maybe even for the first time. And patience isn't just for the young dogs, right? It's also for our older dogs who maybe you gave them a month off and you have to come back and you suddenly realize, like, I thought you would pick up where you left off, but hence you are not a robot, it turns out. Okay, who knew, right? And just the patience to let dogs be dogs and let other beings in your life be them, right? On their timeline. And to understand that you can have both goals and the patience to achieve them. Okay, let me get a drink of water and I'll be right back. Hey everyone, I am so excited to share that we have our first sponsor on the podcast, St. Rocco. You might already know them for their amazing all-natural jerky-style treats, but did you know they also make entrees and food toppers with the same top-notch ingredients? It's true. I've got to be honest, I'm a huge fan of these treats. I use them all the time, whether I'm training, at trials, or even when it's just nail trimming time. My dogs love them, and it feels good to support a small business that genuinely cares about our dogs. And there's something special just for you. St. Rocco is giving Q listeners 20% off. Just use the code JB20 at checkout when you order from saintroccostreats.shop. That's SAINTROCCOS treats.shop, code JB20. I will also put a link in the show notes. Okay, so how do we make sure that we are balancing ambition and patience? Okay, the first step goes back to the goal setting, right? Set like appropriate goals. I'm not even going to say realistic because maybe they're not realistic. Maybe they are big, hairy, audacious goals, as Jim Collins once famously said. Maybe they are those amazing goals that you are super excited about, and maybe you'll get there and maybe you won't, but they're motivating enough to get you out of bed, okay? I love those goals. I love those big goals, and they could be very appropriate. All right, maybe slightly unrealistic even. Maybe they're a stretch goal, but they're appropriate to your skills and your dog's skills and your experience and your trial schedule maybe and things like that, okay? So, but think about the appropriateness of the goals that you are setting. Are they appropriate to a young dog? Are they appropriate to a dog coming back off of rehab? Are they appropriate to you coming back off of rehab? Are they appropriate to your old faithful dog who, runs like that, comfortable slipper, as everybody says, but that dog just had a break, so they're coming back. And, from a month off, are they going to need a weekend to knock the rust off? What are appropriate goals? And what that helps us do is when we look at our goals, like just the weekend ahead, instead of necessarily the quarter or the year ahead, it helps us take more things into account, right? If I'm sitting here, late summer, and I look at my 6-year-old dog, I think like, well, here's what they should be able to accomplish this rest of this year. And it's just another weekend and I'm just going to like drag her out and go run and she should be fine. She's, she knows her job. She knows what's going to go, what's up, da, 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 da. But I don't take into account that like, oh, wait, it's late summer. We just took July off. And I'm going to come back and maybe it's not super appropriate to expect that we just pick off where we left off because actually she was off for 6 weeks now that I think about it. And maybe that's not exactly appropriate. Okay. So it's just making sure that we are constantly asking ourselves, are the goals that I have appropriate this weekend, right now, for the dog that I have? Maybe when I made those goals in January, I didn't know that I would have a 6-week rehab. I didn't know I'd have an ilio strain or something like that in the summer, or I didn't know it'd be a crazy hot summer and I wouldn't be able to do much with my dogs outside. So things happen and you constantly have to look at your goals. That leads, of course, right into process versus outcome goals. We have outcome goals and we need to understand the time frames associated with those goals. If you've done my goal setting stuff, I'm huge on that. Like I'm really breaking it down. Yes, I want to get a mock on my dog, but what am I going to do this year? And further, what am I going to do the last half of this year? Now that, half of the year is behind me with the months that are left, what's going to happen this year? So then we break it down and we break down those outcome goals into milestones as well. But in the meantime, it's those process goals that really are going to fuel us and make us more patient, because those process goals keep our eye on the training, on the building confidence, on the skills. They remind us that when we step to the line this weekend, that we have to make sure that we have connection, that we are cueing ahead of time, that we are where we need to be when we ask our dog to do something. Those are process goals. And we keep our eyes on the process goals. We are naturally more patient because we are being more present. And anytime we can keep our brains, our busy little brains, in the present moment, we are more likely to take into account what is actually happening in the moment, in this present time. We are actually going to be more likely in tune with our dog and understand what's going on, what kind of mood they're in today, what kind of mood we're in today. If we're feeling a little, peaked and overheated, or we're feeling like caffeine and proteined up and ready to go. Okay. Those are two very different versions of me, by the way. So taking all of those things into account, being in the present, focusing on the process goals are going to help us be more patient. Now, if this didn't come across so far, let me remind you that patience does not mean slow. I feel like a lot of people get that, and maybe that's because we were raised by mothers that would just be like, be patient. Why don't you just be patient? And they meant settle down. Well, okay, my mother meant settle down, or stop bugging me is probably more accurately what she meant. But I think a lot of us were told by parents and teachers and others that we had to be patient, and we took that as temper your excitement, calm down, don't bother me, don't be so flitty, and that's not what patience, from a definition standpoint anyway, means. That might be what it looks like on the outside, okay? But that's not the definition of patience. And the way that we're talking about patience today, I don't want you to calm down. I don't want you to lose any of your passion. I don't want you to not be excited to go to a show. I want you to be aware of the time that it's going to take, and allow that to unfold as it's going to unfold. To be in the present moment and see your dog in the present moment and who they're being and who you're being in the present moment. Setting those appropriate goals, creating those realistic process goals, those correct process goals, and understanding that if you execute those right, if you have the patience to be in the present moment and be here and execute, then the outcomes will follow. Okay, that's how we tie all that together. All right. Next is, of course, the small wins. See the progress that you are making week to week, month to month. And I have said this over and over again. I think some of the best way to measure our progress is looking back over at least 90 days. Because in those larger, higher level vantage points, we are able to see all that we've accomplished. Whereas we just look back last weekend, I don't know that I really see that big of a difference. But if I look back, 3, 6, certainly 9 months ago, I know my puppy's a totally different dog. Even my older dog is a different dog. So we can see progress when we kind of get out of the day-to-day and can appreciate all of the steps that we've taken in the meantime. So make sure that you are celebrating those small wins and reinforcing your own positive momentum, and then helping to keep your ambition aligned, not just with where you're going, but with the reality of the progress that you're making. That's, I think, huge, right? Make sure that ambition is aligned with the progress that you are making. Okay. As you go, the next one, you're going to adjust expectations. Okay. You're going to reassess like we talked about, you're going to reassess your needs. If you're doing rehab, maybe you have to get back at it. Maybe you have to start a workout plan. Maybe your dog needs a new workout plan or rehab plan. You're constantly reassessing. We're looking at that. That's fine. That's how it should be. Okay. But again, we're assessing always our ambition against what we want versus where we are and allowing it to unfold. Okay. So beyond just young dogs, right? We've seen how it hits us. It hits seasoned competitors. It hits us all the time, whether it's new challenges or whether it's, going to the same old trial. I think all of us are still committed to learning, right? Again, you wouldn't be listening, right? You wouldn't be trying to improve an aspect of your game. You wouldn't be trying to add mental skills. I know that you are already trying to add handling skills. You're trying to improve, and every dog makes us a little better, whether we want to or not, maybe. But we're always going after something, right? What next? What next? What next? And I don't want us to hurry toward what's next without celebrating, but I do want us to have a direction that we are being pulled in. So ambition, passion, goals, desires, dreams, all of that is great to pull us in the direction that we want to go, that we are excited by the journey and the destination. All right. But at the same time, I want us to be adaptable, maybe a little flexible, and understand that we are going to need some patience to get over the hurdles and the challenges, and maybe even develop the skills that we don't have that we will need for this journey, or our dog doesn't have or need for this journey. And that will, like I said, take patience. So balance this idea of like patience versus ambition. And when you catch yourself behaving in a way that doesn't feel very patient, ask yourself, what's the hurry? Like, are you rushing something with a dog? Are you even rushing a run? You just want it to be over. You just want to get to the outcome and you're rushing through it. Because maybe maybe it's not speed. Maybe it doesn't mean you're running in the obedience ring, but maybe you're rushing because you just want it to be over, right? You're thinking ahead. You're going too far. So patience and being in the present probably go together pretty well, but they are necessary to support our ambition. So I don't know, maybe they're not two sides of the same coin after all. Maybe one is required for the other, because I do think that we need patience to accomplish our dreams, because they don't necessarily happen in the time frame that we want, but also we have big dreams, and big dreams take a lot of skill, a lot of time, a lot of training, a lot of resources, a lot of dedication. And as we talked about in our Toughness and Grit podcast, but then also in the membership, our big dreams take a certain amount of loyalty and dedication over the long haul to stick with them. And that's patience, right? That's the patience to understand that whether you're getting a Mach or whether you're getting a CDX, that there's a lot of steps in between maybe where you are today and where you want to be, and have the patience to commit to all the steps. Okay. So I just thought this was like a good topic for today, thinking about how we can be investing in the long haul, in the future, thinking about where we are not being patient, or where we are sort of rushing or wishing this part was over, kind of like wishing potty training was over, when you have a baby dog, and rushing through things and wanting some things to be over so we can skip on ahead to the good part. But what if you're rushing through the good part? What if this time with your dog, or this time with yourself or your students, is rushing through something, and instead, if you had sort of the patience to sit with it, you could be getting added lessons, or how about added joy? There's a concept. All right. So that's your homework this week, to sort of sit with these concept of patience versus, just all the wanting, right? All the wanting and the passion and, everything that we have there, and just the raw ambition, and understand what it's like to sit in the present moment, focus on those things that need to happen now, and let the future unfold as it will. And I hope whatever you're up to this week with your dogs, I hope you're having a fantastic time. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.